Welcome to Module 2, Core Azure Services. Here you will learn the following concepts: Azure Architectural Components, and then Core Azure Resources. We will describe the benefits and usage of regions and region pairs, availability zones, Azure resources, resource groups, Azure Resource Manager, subscriptions, Azure Management Groups. First, the regions. Azure offers more global regions than any other cloud provider, with 60 plus regions representing over 140 countries. So what is a region? Regions are made up of one or more data centers in close proximity. It provides flexibility and scale to reduce customer latency, preserve data residency with a comprehensive compliance offerings. For example, you have regions like East US, Central US, Spain Central, Northern Europe, South India, Central India, and each of these regions is a combination of multiple data centers. And then we have region pairs. For example, you can see on the right side, Northern Central US is paired with South Central US. East US is paired with West US. West US2 is paired with West Central US. And these region pairs, they are separated at least 300 miles of separation between these regions, these region pairs. And there is an automatic replication of some services between these region pairs. Prioritized region recovery in the event of outage. It's the main reason when there is an outage in one of the region. Then all the data in that specific region is backed up to the paired regions. Updates are rolled out sequentially to minimize downtime. For more information, you can click on the web link. You can go to the web link and find more information. And then we have geographies. We mostly discuss about regions and region pairs, but geographies are not discussed often. This is just for understanding. So geography is typically contain two or more regions, and it allows customer with specific data residency and compliance needs to keep their data and applications in close proximity. Categorized as Americas, Europe, Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa. And then we have availability options. So we have availability zones, region pairs, single VMs, easier lift and shift. They come with the 99.9 percentage with the premium SSD storage. And then we have availability zones, which is mainly for protection from entire, and we have availability zones, which is the protection from entire data center failures. And then we have multi-region disaster recovery using region pairs. Let's discuss about availability zones. It provides protection against downtime due to data center failures. Physically separate data centers within the same region. Each data center is equipped with independent power, cooling, and networking, connected through private fiber optic networks. So on the right hand side, you can see there is an Azure region. In the Azure region, we have 3 availability zones. So the least amount of resiliency which we can get is within a data center. So there is not too much cost compared to using Azure availability zones. So within a data center, if you have like a virtual machine or any other data, it's copied into 3 different copies across the data center. And if the data center is down for some reason, then you may lose the data. So if you want to increase the resiliency, you choose availability zones where these copies are distributed between multiple data centers through availability zones. And then we have Azure resources. Azure resources are components like storage, virtual machines, and networks that are available to build cloud solutions. And then you have resource groups. These individual resources like virtual machines, SQL database, virtual networks, they can be put into a logical group, which is nothing but resource groups. So a resource group is a container to manage and aggregate resources in a single unit. Resources can exist in only one resource group. Resources can exist in different regions. Resources can be moved to different resource groups. Applications can utilize multiple resource groups. And then we have Azure Resource Manager. Azure Resource Manager provides a management layer that enables you to create, update, and delete resources in Azure subscription. For example, the most common way to create and delete a resource or to make any updates to the resource is through the Azure portal using the GUI. But there are also several other methods to update a resource using tools like Azure PowerShell, Azure CLI, and REST clients. And the management layer every one of them uses is Azure Resource Manager. And then we have Azure subscriptions. An Azure subscription provides you with authenticated and authorized access to Azure accounts. It's a billing boundary. It's used to generate separate billing reports, invoices for each subscription. Access control boundary. Manage and control access to the resources that users can provision with specific subscriptions. For example, if you look at the right hand diagram, you have an Azure account on the top, and below that we have several subscriptions: dev, test, production, and in each of these subscriptions you can create multiple resources, resource groups, etc. And then we have management groups. Management groups can include multiple Azure subscriptions. Subscriptions inherit conditions applied to the management group. 10,000 management groups can be supported in a single directory. A management group tree can support up to 6 levels of depth. So if you see the diagram on the right side, the topmost level is management groups. Subscriptions are always under management groups, and the resource groups are always under the resource groups are always under subscriptions, and the resources are always under resource groups. And we discuss about core Azure workloads. So we have Azure Compute Services. Azure Compute is an on-demand computing service that provides computing resources such as disks, processors, memory, networking, and operating systems. You can see some of the compute resources from the diagrams: virtual machines, app services, container instances, Azure Kubernetes services, and Windows virtual desktops. All these have disks, processors, memory, networking, and operating systems underlying. And Azure Virtual Machines. Azure Virtual Machines are a software emulation of physical computers. It includes virtual processor, memory, storage, and networking. It's also an IaaS offering that provides total control and customization of your virtual machine. And you have App Services. App Services is a fully managed platform to build, deploy, and scale web apps and APIs quickly. It works with .NET, .NET Core, Node.js, Java, Python, or PHP. It's a PaaS offering with enterprise-grade performance, security, and compliance requirements. So if you want to run a code without worrying about or managing about the virtual machine, so you can use Azure App Services in any of the languages mentioned here. And then you have Azure Containers And then you have Azure Container Services. Azure containers are a lightweight virtualized environment that does not require operating system management and can respond to changes on demand. So it can quickly scale up and down based on the requirement. So in the Azure Container Services, we have few offerings. One is Azure Container Instances, a PaaS offering that runs a container in Azure without the need to manage virtual machine or additional services. And we have Azure Kubernetes Service, an orchestration service for containers with distributed architecture and large volumes of architecture. Azure Kubernetes Service, an orchestrated service for containers with distributed architectures and large volumes of containers. And then we have Azure Virtual Desktops. Azure Virtual Desktop is a desktop and app virtualization that runs in the cloud. Create a full desktop virtualization environment without having to run additional gateway servers. It publishes unlimited host pools to accommodate diverse workloads. It reduces cost with pooled multi-session resources, which means a single device of a Windows 10 or 11 can allow multiple users to log into them and share the resources. And we have Azure Networking Services. Under that, we have Azure Virtual Network, VNet. It enables Azure resources to communicate with each other, the internet, or on-premise networks. We have Virtual Private Network Gateway, VPN, is used to send encrypted traffic between the Azure Virtual Network and an on-premise location over the public internet. And we also have Azure Express Route extends on-premise networks into Azure over a private network that is facilitated by connectivity provider. It's more expensive way of connecting Azure and on-premises out of all the options that we have. And we have Azure Storage Services. Under Azure Storage Services, we have container storage. Blob is optimized for storing massive amounts of unstructured data such as text or binary data. We have disk storage that provides disks for virtual machines, applications, and other services to access and use. We have Azure Files, sets up a highly available network file shares that can be accessed by using the standard server message block SMB protocol. And in the Azure storage, we have different access tiers. One is hot, optimized for storing data that is accessed frequently, which is more commonly used. But if you have some data which you may not be using for very frequently or not going to use in the near future, we can look at other options, which is cool, optimized for storing data that is infrequently accessed and stored for at least 30 days. And then we also have archive tier. It's optimized for storing data that is rarely accessed and stored for at least 180 days with flexible latency requirements. And you can switch between these access tiers at any time. Next, we have Azure Cosmos Database is a globally distributed database service that elastically and independently scales throughput and storage. And we have Azure's SQL Database is a relational database as a service dash based on the latest stable version of the Microsoft SQL Server database engine. Then we have Azure Database for MySQL is a fully managed MySQL database service for app developers. Next, we have Azure Database for PostgreSQL is a relational database service based on the open source Postgres database engine. Azure SQL Managed Instance. Azure SQL Managed Instance allows existing SQL customers to lift and shift their on-premise applications to the cloud with minimal application and database changes. So if you have a SQL on your on-premise servers, this is the one of the best option to lift and shift without making many changes to the application and database. Fully managed and evergreen platform as a service. It preserves all PaaS capabilities, automatic patching and version updates automated backups, and high availability. Exchange existing license for discounted rates. Exchange existing licenses for discounted rates on SQL managed instance using the Azure hybrid benefit. So if you have an existing license on your on-premise, with the exchange, you can get a discounted rate to use the SQL managed instance in the cloud. Then you have Azure Marketplace. Azure Marketplace allows customers to find, try, purchase, and provision applications and services from hundreds of leading service providers, which are all certified to run on Azure. It's an open source container platforms, virtual machine and database images. It has application build and deployment softwares. It has developer tools and much more with 10,000 plus listings. Quickly look at how the Azure portal looks. So normally the URL to access Azure portal is portal.azure.com, and once you log in, so you have this create a resource, or on the left hand side you see this ribbon. So when you click on it, you will see multiple offerings in Azure. So there are several categories. So for example, if you go to the all resources, you see the complete resources what you own. And if you go here and if you click on create a resource, and on the left hand side you see different categories. So for example, the most common thing which we normally create is a virtual machine. So if you want to create a virtual machine, you can either search here virtual machine and select here, or you go back all resources, sorry, you go back and create a resource, and with experience you get to know what is the category to select when you want a specific resource. So the Azure virtual machines come under compute. So when you click on compute, you also see what are the different compute resources under this, and then you can click on virtual machine create. So in this session, we'll just be looking at what are the how the Azure portal looks, and what are the different types of resources. If you want to find the resources, you just go and just play through all these multiple storage and security, what are the different resources under each category. We'll just review the module what we covered so far. Microsoft provides more global presence than any other cloud provider with 60 plus regions distributed worldwide. We looked at Azure management tools such as Azure Portal, Azure CLI, PowerShell, and then we have Azure multiple services, compute, networking, storage, and databases, which we have briefly looked at what are some of the services under each category. And then we saw what is Azure Marketplace.